sidelines, I have two special guests also joining me to talk about their journey with Berkshire Hathaway, as well as how Mr. Warren Buffett inspires them daily. Names you know back home very well, Mohnish Pabrai as well as Spier. Great to see you guys here.
Tanvir, great to be with you, and glad we could connect. And yeah, so this is my 20th year.
Yeah, I mean that was something that really took me aback. 20 years, Guy. How long has it been for you?
About 20 years, although I missed 1 year. This is a real shame.
I know, okay, 19, but 20 years, 2 decades of visiting this event.
I used to have a head full of hair when I first started coming.
now he's got a great mustache.
So. More wisdom now. Yeah. But how does it feel? I mean, each year, what changes?
Well, this is like a pilgrimage, like people go to Mecca and other places. This is our Woodstock for capitalist pilgrimage. And really what happens is that, every year we've been driving for a year, the windshield is all gunky. Yeah. We get a giant dose of Windex, everything gets cleaned up, the principles get reinforced, and we can drive for another year. Yeah. So it's really trying to kind of reinforce core value principles, core life principles, and just taking it all in. And of course now in Omaha, I have so many friends around the world that I only see in Omaha. so it's just great to be here every year, and it's just a great weekend.
Yeah, you made an important point, Mohnish. At the end of the day, it's about really assessing the last 12 months. Yeah. And each year with each AGM, each shareholder meet, the world changes a bit. Yeah. And the last 12 months, the world has changed a lot.
Warren and Charlie change as well. So, I think they've evolved over time. It's really interesting to see, for example, now Warren took a foray into technology in 2 companies, IBM and Apple, and now he's sold some of IBM. And so it's very interesting to see how they've changed. They're not the same people they were 20 years ago.
That's important. Did that surprise you?
Well, it didn't surprise me about IBM because I think he realized probably a few years ago that it was a mistake. But even Apple, I think Apple is not more so much technology as a franchise. Yeah. You have an iPhone?
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't?
I'm not the audience that iPhone addresses.
Us diehard iPhone addicts can't live without them.
So it is addictive for the friends who have it. It's a franchise that just grows into your life completely. But the point remains that consumer tech, does his purchase of Apple give a sense that he is drifting a little bit towards understanding consumerism in a tie-up with technology?
Well, so Warren's always been really good with consumers. I mean, the consumer non-durables is one of his very core competencies. And I think in this case, it's not thematic. I think Berkshire's always been opportunistic. So I think in this case, either Todd or Ted, one of the 2 managers, bought. And he's got a bunch of grandkids who have iPhones, etc. So I think it was him understanding the behavior patterns and the stickiness, if you will. And so Apple is, like Munger says, it's not a cinch. Yeah. And the other problem he has is he's drowning in cash. So the places he can put 10, 20 billion to work at a time are very limited. So his universe is very different from the universe of most of the other investors. And so that's something we should keep in mind.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, closing into its 52-week high, one would imagine that would Apple offer the kind of value that it did maybe 5-10 years back? And he's bought it at this point.
Well, not for us. We're looking at smaller things. As you know, we were even in India looking for things. But when you have the pile of cash that Warren has, there are very, very few things that he can look at. In a certain way, we can work harder because there's smaller companies to look at. He has about, I don't know, what is it, maybe 50 companies in the world?
Yeah.
80,
but
very small list.
Warren's yardstick is the S&P 500. And if I were a betting man, I would say the Apple likely beats the S&P over the next 5 or 10 years.
Oh, okay. So even from here?
Yeah, even from here. Yeah. It's not expensive from an earnings point of view. It's not expensive from a multiple point of view.
Okay,
yeah.
You should be really proud of the number of Indians here and the number of Indians who've flown in from India. So the amazing thing for me is that I get to see some Indian friends here every year because they're here, and that's really special.
Well, this is our first time. This is the first time the Indian News Television Network is here and reporting on the ground. But yes, the Indian contingent is growing. I'm told that last year, about 2 years back, there were about 30 odd people, and now that number is doubled from the contingent that has accompanied us. So
I think my guess is probably over 100 people from India. Yeah. And what took you guys so long? Like, hello, ET now.
We're finally here. Yeah, and that's, I think, telling. No, absolutely. And I think this is something that we would be trying to do each year because as an event, it's gaining a lot of popularity. I was looking at the numbers, right? So you had a gathering of about 37,000 last year. You had 11 lakh people tuning into Yahoo Finance. And those numbers are going to be startlingly higher this year, are expected to be much, much higher this year.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. I'm still getting used to lakh, by the way. Mohnish keeps
1.1 million.
There we go. I was thinking 11,000. No, okay, got it. So.
I always have fun guy with crores and lakhs and millions and dollars and rupees and converting back and forth.
There's something else very interesting for me that's going on in India. So in case you hadn't noticed, I have an English accent. But I really feel like India is changing in that when I feel like India, the first time I went, sort of was much closer to the UK. And that you being here, I bet you there's no Indian TV station that's going to cover some meeting in the UK. And it shows a gradual move in India to sort of looking towards the United States, even though the US never colonized India, you know. And it's kind of interesting, I felt that very much in hotels in India. There's a very, very different vibe going on, which is an American vibe, which I think is really, really positive for India. There's an egalitarianism in the United States that is coming in the UK, but it's coming much slower. And India's now taking from that, I think.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's particularly about the US, but I think it's also about local media going global, and it's across the world. It's and I think one will have to see how that pans out in India. But I do see a lot of global events getting a fair amount of local coverage. From local media, essentially, in various regions.
Yeah, but India is such a special place because there are many places that I've traveled to where if you're in Brazil, you're in Brazil. But India's kind of this globally connected place. I don't fully understand why. Delhi especially. Delhi, we were saying, Delhi is the most multicultural city of anywhere in the world. It's funny because I said, maybe...
It's got a lot of layers. Delhi's...
No, I think that's also got to do with the fact that Indians are very inquisitive, they're very knowledge hungry, and I guess we have an audience. I mean, the fan club that Warren Buffett has in India is just mind-boggling.
That's right.
And that just shows in the contingent.
For good reason, for very, very good reason.
Very good reason.
But India is the ultimate global country in a way that I don't think maybe Indians fully understand because it's such a diverse place. And it's very natural for India to be connected to the world in a way that other countries aren't. So you really should have been here 20 years ago, but it's great that you're here now. So.
Yeah. Better late than never, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But, talking about India, talking about emerging markets, do you expect him to really break ground when it comes to highlighting his investment philosophy? Yes, he's tested waters in China. Yes, he's invested in PetroChina. He's sold out. And of course, now there's been some online investment tie-up as well that's been forged. But do you think that he'll talk more about how he would want to make money in emerging markets?
Yeah, I mean, I think Warren understands that he has a very limited number of opportunities to deploy capital in the United States. And he also understands that other parts of the world, China, India, Latin America and so on, there are some great companies run by great managers with great franchises, and some of them are at a size that would be very attractive to Berkshire. I run into many companies in India which are in the mold of Berkshire. For example, recently I had visited the folks at Piramal. And I mean, Piramal, if you read the annual report, it reads like a Berkshire report. And
I read a headline also calling Ajay Piramal, Warren Buffett.
And he is pro-shareholder. He's focused on maximization of shareholder returns while following the highest ethics. And so a lot of that, to see that in India is fantastic. It's wonderful.
Do you expect him to say a lot more about India?
It's interesting. So Warren's this amazing personality. He's on the one hand, unbelievably global and sophisticated, but when you sit down with him, he's incredibly Midwestern and local as well. And so he does things like PetroChina that he did, but I think that in many cases, Mohnish, when it comes to India, he would rely on people like Ajit Jain or other people that he knows. So he kind of is so clear in recognizing his own limitations. And so somebody like me will go gung-ho to India and maybe not really understand the subtleties.
But it's inevitable that Berkshire will end up with meaningful amounts of capital in India. I think that's a given, just because of the size as it's growing. and just the universe of opportunity. So I think over the next 5 or 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised if we would see Berkshire step in.
But his strategy's changed, right? Now he's looking at majority acquisitions. He's not looking at minority stakes, and the stakes are high as well, right? He's not looking at a couple of $100 million because he started in PetroChina with $500 million.
That's
so
right.
that with that sort of philosophy,
what I mean is that Berkshire will make whole acquisitions in India.
Oh, okay.
You know, I think they will
Running
take
into billions of dollars.
into the billions or tens of billions, and India is growing, and there is a set of companies who have the size and scale.
Mohnish, which companies are you talking about? Have the size and the scale.
I'll lay down the gauntlet for you. So I am partly Israeli, and there's an Israeli company called Ishkar that read about Warren Buffett, wrote to him, and they sold their company for about $5 billion.
wow.
So I'm laying down the gauntlet for all those private Indian companies. You know, you can't be first anymore because Israel was first,
Yeah.
but you might be second or third. So, you know.
I'm so glad you brought this point up because in one of his sound bites in his interviews, when he was in India in 2011, he said, "Look, I'm keen on investing in India. Give me a call. I look at companies, I look at managements, and I make my investment decision."
That's right.
I don't know whether anybody called him, but he's waiting for a call from India.
Yeah, and I think what people from India who approach him will be surprised. They'll be surprised at the speed. Many times when I've sent Warren ideas, he responds in minutes.
Wow.
And usually it's a no, but the response is fast. But they don't. But Berkshire doesn't keep you waiting. And so one of the good things about dealing with them is that if there's a private business that sees an opportunity where it's a win-win with Berkshire, I think that's bound to happen.
Give me more insights, Mohnish. Give me some insights on the kind of businesses, companies that you find interesting in India, or you advised him to look at.
I mean, I think he would be very interested in consumer non-durables. So I think that the P&Gs of the world and the Kraft Heinz of the world, and I think those types of businesses, there's a number of them that are emerging and they're growing very rapidly. So in the next 5 or 10 years, I'm almost sure in that space Berkshire will play.
Yeah, and it's important. It's again, you guys are giving me cues for my next questions. But it's really about the Unilever failure, the acquisition failure that happened.
Yeah.
The $146 billion. I mean, that's how consumers are being priced.
That's right.
And it just made me think that, wow, Mr. Buffett has not really played on the Indian consumer story as yet.
Yeah, no, but I think they'll want to play, and I think Berkshire is not a aggressive acquirer. They're not going to do anything hostile. So the approach really has to come from the Indian promoters and the Indian managements.
Yeah.
So the phone lines in Omaha are open, and they will ring. At some point they'll ring.
But to give you a sense, Warren came to Europe, it was maybe 5 years ago now, and he said, you don't have to come to me if you've got answers to your problems, but if you take, and I know that this appears in the Indian press all the time, where you have some kind of potential family feud that's brewing over the next generation of the assets. I think that the way it worked for Ishkar is that the founding father said, I don't want my younger generation fighting over this. So the company goes to Berkshire, and Berkshire still selects people from that family to run it. And they get to have a much more peaceful time because they divide the assets up. So Warren wants to come in where there's some kind of problem maybe in a well-run, successful family business where the founder says, I don't want family strife going to the next generation. And if you...
Yeah. My mind is just scanning through all the businesses, all the family-owned groups which are
in India, it's the norm that the public companies are family-controlled. Yeah. Not the exception.
So many of them.
And we know that many of those families, when the generational transfers take place, there are problems. And so actually Berkshire probably has very elegant solutions for many of those types of, and I think in most cases the people don't think of Berkshire.
But I think that's very important. That's very important to highlight back home that, it's not like Mr. Buffett is not into emerging markets, he's not into India. It's just that he's not been given the kind of opportunity which he thinks is compelling for him to invest.
So I think the Indian promoters have to reach out to him, and then after that it's about the quality of the people and the quality of the business, and I think he's got his checkbook out.
Mohnish, there's something else I think that's going on, is that when I speak to people who don't know Berkshire, they just have to imagine that Berkshire is some kind of avaricious, hard-charging, aggressive, and they say, why would I sell to some American like that? And they don't realize that there's a very unique and special culture that's here. But what I would say is that on the recent trip that I did with Mohnish to India, what's incredible is that there are, and not amongst the larger cap companies, there are a few diamonds in the rough. There are gems of families and promoters where they're actually in the Buffett mold and they don't realize it. You know, it's kind of special in some of those meetings.
That's right.
Because like they don't realize what they are and what they've got. It's kind of, so there's still opportunity, enormous opportunity in India for us.
Yeah.
But the sellers don't realize what they've got in Berkshire.
Yeah, so. And in fact, Mr. Jain as well on his last visit was talking about it. He's like, I think somewhere in the future they would kind of work towards collectively making themselves more available to the Indian market and being more accessible perhaps to Indian companies. $87 billion is what they have in cash.
Yes.
Do you expect him to say where he's looking to deploy that money, or because he hates cash?
Well,
He's made that.
I think Berkshire for 50 years has not had a strategic plan. They're opportunistic. So Warren is sitting at his desk waiting for the phone to ring. And when the right phone call comes, he's ready to write the check.
Where do you think, if you were his advisor, where would you ask him to invest right now? Because markets are at record highs.
I don't know where I'd advise him to invest. I'm having a hard enough time investing a much, much smaller amount of money. I think that what's interesting is that he's jealous of his capacity to invest that capital well, and he sees it as an enormous challenge that he's up to do that. And there's this consistent drumbeat. Warren, send the cash back to the shareholders like you tell your investee companies to do. And he's kind of like, he's grudgingly said, all right, well, if the share price gets to this, within this proportion of book value, I'll do it. But he believes, and it's incredible, I mean, he has put the cash to work. I mean, he said he's looking for $50 billion acquisitions. Yeah. So he might find one, Yeah. He keeps surprising us.
Or he could do it in tie-up like he was planning with 3G Capital. I mean, $146 billion is crazy.
I think 3G will play a much larger role in the years to come. I think that playbook has just started.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we saw there was this incredible interview with Warren and Georges at Harvard Business School, where he basically said, Warren's got this unlimited wallet, and whatever Georges needs, Warren seems to be willing to put to work. So that's a very good relationship. Yeah.
And that's a really good partnership. 3G is really good at operations. And Warren is a really good partner. Yeah. So I think that's a win-win. And so we may not see it with Indian companies, but we're definitely going to see it with companies with operations in India, which are some of these global multinationals. And so that will happen. And so they're going to touch India one way or another.
Okay, but do you think he typically, as far as I recall, doesn't really comment on market levels and market direction? But world markets are at record highs when the world is going through a very serious political transition, and we live in a divided mandate. It's as divided as you can get. I mean, no poll or no election has or even the referendum results, right? They've always been divided between 51, 49, 52, 48. And so do you believe that he would want to offer his views on the direction of the markets from here? Because we've been 8 years into the bull market in the United States. I think in the 1990s we did about 9 years, which is overshooting the average time.
Yeah, I think Berkshire, they don't look at it that way. I think they look at it from one business at a time.
They don't, Mohnish, but the world wants to know what he thinks.
And they don't care what the world thinks, I can tell you.
Ought not to focus on the macro. The world ought to focus on the businesses, the entrepreneurs, the opportunity, because that is really how you can make money. And if you overdose on all these macro things that are going on, you can miss the forest from the trees.
But do you think that like his comment or his views on President Trump, his 100 days in office, would be something that investors would want to hear about?
I'm actually sure that question will come up, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they answer it.
Well, I don't think they're going to go there. I don't think they're going to be going very deeply into...
Because business environment is also influenced by policy, right?
Yes,
and who's at the center. So I know, macros may not on an overall basis impact the way he thinks, but he has got to be thinking about that, because the more I talk to people, the most experienced and the most reverent investors across the world, and they're all rolling up their eyes and they're like, okay, fine, let's see how this all turns out.
The Trump presidency is probably a heavy net positive for Berkshire. And so I think many of the things that are going to come out with the Trump presidency will not only be good for Berkshire, they're actually going to be good for the United States and probably good for the rest of the world as well.
Essentially talking about taxes coming down.
Yeah, so taxes coming down. And I think one thing about Donald Trump, which the rest of the world has difficulty with, is you have to distinguish between the bark and the bite. So the best way to deal with the Donald is ignore the barking and focus on the actions. And when you actually look at the actions, they're fairly mainstream. And so I think we're going to have we have a great cabinet under the president, and I think possible some of the gridlock gets broken.
So if US is doing okay, India is doing okay, what about Europe? That's home to you.
It's home to me, and I have to say that Brexit personally is very painful to me because I have all sorts of connections to the UK and to Europe. I don't think that Brexit is a big deal in terms of economic development. I mean, it doesn't change the way I think of my investments, and I think that anybody who changes the way they think of their investments, even European-based companies, it's not a smart thing, and it may not even go through. You know, so it's great for you because you can talk about it, but we should actually ignore those things. Just going back to the new presidency here and Warren and Charlie, I think that what really impressed me in Charlie's comments was how quickly they're not ideological. And actually Mohnish and I have talked about this. Mohnish is not ideological. I'm probably more ideological than Mohnish. And they clear distinction between the office of the presidency and what the presidency does and their own personal opinions. And I think that many people, and you get into big trouble if you start investing based on your political views, and they very clearly don't do that. And Warren was very quick actually in an interview after the election to say that if Donald Trump would like his opinions and help, he would go there in an instant. And it was almost sort of signaling he was clearly in favor of Hillary at the time, but he was signaling to many people and saying, look, he's our president and we need to help him.
Oh, absolutely. As we wind up, because I know in moments we will have Warren Buffett, if the camera can just pan to my left, we will have Warren Buffett as well as Bill Gates, come down here, interact with shareholders and play some games. We'll want to catch that for our viewers. Just final question. I mean, do you think after hearing him out today, you would make your next investment, and would that be in India?
Well, I'm already investing mostly in India now because I can't find much in the US. I think the only two geographies where I'm finding stuff is South Korea and India. And so I am a bull on India. I think India will do very well. And I think India has lots and lots of companies that are underfollowed and not well understood. And that's where the opportunity is.
Yeah.
Guys,
you know, I've been to India with Mohnish, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 times. And other times we visited Dakshana, which is this incredible foundation. And this was the first time that we visited companies. And I have to say that this was so much fun and so interesting. I am biting at the bit and cannot get into India because there are certain aspects of the Indian bureaucracy that work quite slowly. And as I get myself licensed to get into India, it's about a 6-month process. So some of the companies that we visited, I don't even want to look at their share prices because I don't want to be in the pain of knowing I could have bought them. Yeah. So I think in another month or 2 I'll be ready, and I'm looking forward very much to. It's not the first time. I was invested in India about 10 years ago in Crizzle. Okay. And so I'm familiar with India, but I'm looking forward to getting back in.
That one would have made a lot of money for you.
Yeah, unfortunately I sold it too soon. But.
Okay. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.